What is up guys, and welcome to my latest video. As you can see, we have the SX back on the table, and today I thought I would go back to the sort of vintage days of this channel and share 10 tips for the SX. These are all going to be incredibly useful, so if you're an SX or an A user, you definitely want to check these out. They're going to help you use the machine faster, easier, and make it much more fun. Right, just before we start guys, as usual, please don't forget to check out the links in the description. It keeps me funding doing what I'm doing here, especially spvids.com, where I sell my beat packs and merch. All the sales from that help me keep making videos, buy new equipment, etc, etc. So if you could check out all those links in the description, I would really appreciate that. Okay, let's get into tip number one. Now, you can apply an MFX to the signal coming into this box, and it just means that you don't have to resample that straight away once it's inside the unit. And it's really easy to do this. You just have to check one thing. So let's say, for example, you wanted a compressor, which is MFX12. You can see I've got that selected. You need to press remain, and you just need to check here that the external source button is lit. You may press that and see that it's not lit like this, in which case you need to press it and make sure it is lit. That means that when you're recording through the external source, through the back of the unit, the MFX is going to apply to that signal, and it just means that you don't need to do a resample straight away. So that's a really useful tip. It's going to save you a lot of time with resampling, and yeah, it's quite useful because you can apply any of the 24 MFX and the ones up here as well. You can apply that to the sound coming into the device. Okay, tip number two, and this involves scrolling through the MFX at the side here. We've got 24, and most of you will probably hold the MFX button and use the right hand dial like this to get through 1 to 24. That's absolutely fine, that works perfectly well. But did you know that you can also use the pads down here to access these, and it becomes really quick once you remember the positions of some of them. So for example, if I wanted 12, which is compressor again, we've already mentioned that in this video, hold MFX and press 12, and that means I am now on MFX 12. MFX 1, MFX 2, you just hold the MFX button and press these. Now, what if you need to get from 13 to 24? Obviously we've only got 12 here, 12 pads for 12 MFX. What you need to do to get to 13 to 24 is hold the MFX and the DJFX looper buttons at the same time. Okay, and now if I press 4, for example, I get MFX 16. That's a very common one because I use the vinyl sim a lot, so both those buttons and 4, and I've got 16, both those buttons and 12, I get 24. If I want to go back to 12, just MFX and 12. So that's a much easier way of cycling through these MFX at the side here, and as you use the device more, you get to know the combinations really easily. So I know MFX 12 is compressor, I know that MFX and DJ looper and 4 is 16. You get to know them really well. It saves you a lot of time, and it's a bit fiddly with that dial and holding the MFX button, so I'm sure that one's going to be useful for you. One of the downsides of the SX and the A is that we don't have mute groups, which is annoying for a sampling device, but there we go, that's the way it is. So one thing that's really hard to do is repeat a sample. Say it's a chop, the same chop. Say if we want to do something like this. Those sort of patterns and things like that are quite common in beat making. It's really hard to do with just one pad like this. You can hear that we're getting little pauses in between. Now, some of you may lean into that and it's sort of the sound of the SX, and that's quite cool, but I like to do this little trick, and that is to double up that chop if you've got the space on your bank. So all you have to do is a copy of 1. So I've already done this, I've done a copy of 1 and put it on 5 as well. It's exactly the same chop, you can hear. But now what this lets me do is skip between those two seamlessly. So listen to this. That sounds a lot smoother than going. And I've done that for the second chop along here as well, actually. Just makes switching between the same chop a lot easier than trying to use one button like this. Gives you a few more options creatively as well, so if you haven't tried that technique before, I definitely recommend that you give that a go. Okay, the next tip is about MFX and allowing you to have the effect on more than one pad at the same time. So let's say, for example, we want MFX 16, and I'm going to make sure the noise is on a little bit so you can hear that this is on. And I want that on multiple pads. Let's say I want it on those 2 chops that I just did. You press and hold remain. So you hold remain, and now you can select as many pads as you want. So I've selected those 4. Okay, so that's a really nice way to be able to have the effects on multiple pads. But also another tip, and this is probably a little bonus tip, if you hold remain and press the MFX button, assuming you've already got the MFX selected that you want, so it's going to be MFX 16 for me, if you press that, you can see it's applied it to every single pad on that bank. So now you can hear it's on all of them, and to switch it off you just do the reverse, you just hold remain and press the pad again, the MFX button, sorry, and it will take it off all of them. So it's really, really nice that, especially when you're using something like compressor, because you just want it on everything. So you just make sure you've got the MFX selected that you want, MFX 16 here, hold remain, press the MFX button, and it applies it to the whole bank. And from the look of it there, it applies it to the external source as well. So super handy shortcut. I'm sure you guys are going to use that one. Okay, a little tip with the mic is what I'm going to share with you next. So the mic is often used to capture little follies and little sounds that you can run over your beats, but there's one thing that I think it's really, really useful for, which I've used a lot in the past, and that is to record voice notes onto your SX, and they can be little reminders for the projects that you're building. So you can imagine that once you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and double that, 10 projects maybe, if you work on a kind of 1 beat per bank basis, it's really easy to get lost, especially if you'd make a few beats, go off and do something else, maybe come back to it later in the day. You will forget certain things. So a great thing you can use the mic for is just to turn the mic on, record onto a pad, and just make little voice notes, maybe the BPM. So you might do a little voice note that says this project's 88 beats a minute. I really like the way I put swing in the beat. I like the way that the chops 1, 2 and 3 work together, etc, etc. You get the idea, but it's really powerful for saving ideas that you've had and you want to make sure that you remember them. So yeah, I can't demonstrate on this video because obviously I'm recording into the mic to talk and it's just going to be a bit too chaotic, but use the microphone, figure out how to use the microphone to record to a pad. It's really, really easy. Then you can use this mic to record little voice notes and save them in your projects, and then you can remember exactly what you want to do with that particular project. Okay, another good tip is stopping all the sounds on the SX or A very quickly. Now you can do this by pressing cancel 4 times in a row, but that soon gets tedious when you're wanting to do it over and over again. And anyway, there's a much quicker way which I've been using for years, which is much better. I'm going to demonstrate it now. So I'm going to turn gate off some of these pads, just basically so I can create an absolute racket. And what I'm going to do is to stop every single sound in this device, I'm just going to hit record. So I'll demonstrate now. You see, so it's gone into record mode, it's cancelled all the sounds, and then all you have to do is press cancel, and then you're back to where you want to be. So it's a super handy tip, this, and I've used it so many times over the years. I really, really recommend getting into the habit of doing this. I'll just show you quickly again. See how quick that is, and then just cancel, and you're out, and everything is silent again, which is really nice. Okay, another good tip here is if you use the LOFI button, so I'm going to choose 1, and I'm going to put LOFI on. It's kind of adding that bit crusher effect, that sort of lower sample rate effect, but it's very, very harsh when you just put the button on like this. Very metallic. Now, one thing that you can do is, obviously because this is kind of its own effect in its own way, the button here, you can either use the isolator or the filter to mellow things out a little bit. So we've got the LOFI on 1. Now let's use the filter. I'm going to turn the left dial all the way to the right. I'm going to make sure that resonance and the drive is down, and let's have an experiment with this. And there we go, that sounds a lot more palatable and a lot nicer on the ears than without the filter. And obviously you can mess with this left-hand dial as much as you want. Just takes that metallic edge off it and makes it sound a little bit smoother. We could do the same with the isolator. Let's make sure the mids and the lows are up. And there we go, we're just taking some of the highs off there. That's with, this is without. You can just smooth that effect out and make it sound a lot nicer. So yeah, use the Lo-Fi button, but use it in combination with the other MFX as well to make it sound a little bit sweeter. Okay, this is one which not a lot of people use, and it's so handy. It's not perfect, but it's the only real sort of way we've got of doing this on the SX and A, and that is repitching using the DJ Effects Looper MFX. Now, sounds crazy, but hear me out. So let's go to pad 1. I've got this sample, obviously, I've been playing it about 1,000 times in this video. I'm going to go ahead and press DJ Effects Looper. I'm going to make sure the right hand dial is off, and you're going to have to experiment with the length a little bit to get the sweet spot. And we're going to use this middle dial to repitch it. So if you turn it all the way to the right, we get 1.0. Basically the original sample, but let's change that to 0.8 for example. Okay, and we've repitched the sample. It's kind of given us a weird effect on it, but that could be masked when you put the drums and everything over the top. And like I mentioned, you can experiment with this length. Gives you some very interesting results. It kind of does little skips, and you do get a little bit of a weird sound to it, but it's quite an interesting sound. And we don't really have any other option on the SX that's any good. This is probably the best way to repitch samples. Let's go ahead and hit remain DJ Effects Looper, that tip that I showed you before. Now that's going to be on all the samples. So yeah, I think that's a relatively good option. Use the DJ Effects Looper. The length you're going to have to play around with to try and get the sweet spot. The right hand dial needs to be off, and then just use the middle dial and experiment with that and see if you can find a sweet spot where the repitching works nicely. Okay, one of the tips that I want to share on this one is more of a kind of philosophical one, and that is that this is obviously a very limited device, but you know, people say a lot that limitations are a good thing, and the reason why they're good, I think that's a lot of the time you don't really hear why. I find that a bit frustrating, but I've figured out over the years that one of the best things about limitations is that it limits the amount of decisions that you need to make. So if you're one of those people that kind of overthinks everything all the time, you can't really do that with this device because you're only limited to being able to do certain things. So I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, but mute groups, for example, should I put those in a mute group? Should I not put those in a mute group? You don't have mute groups on this device, so you can't use them whatsoever. So when you hear that expression, oh, embrace limitations, it's going to make you better at making beats, the way I interpret that now is that it helps me make decisions a lot quicker because I'm limited to certain decisions, and that's going to aid my beat making process in that way. Another one is obviously we've only got 24 effects in total. When you've got a DAW, you've got access to literally an infinite amount of things that you can do with the sound in there. You've only got limited options here, so it really narrows down how many different things you could do to change the sound of the sample. Things like that, they're really powerful when you're being creative. They limit what you can do and they force you down a certain path. And if you can embrace that, you're going to really enjoy using something like this because it just saves you a lot of headaches, a lot of doubt in the beat making process or in the creative process, whatever it is that you're making with this device. And that's the reason why limitations are a good thing in my opinion, and why they should be embraced. So yeah, this is a limited device. Obviously the Mark II is a massive step up, but you can still get good results with it and you can still have a lot of fun with it, and it can be useful to have less options available to you. So really think about that when you're finding limitations annoying. Think about how they're actually helping you to push yourself along the creative process and get towards the finish line, because they're stopping you from having to make hundreds and hundreds of different decisions. So I think that's a really good way of looking at it, and I think that's going to help your whole approach to this device. Okay, last but by no means least, just put compressor on absolutely everything on this device. And I know that sounds stupid, but especially for the sort of beats that I've been making at the moment, which are kind of energetic soul beats, just putting compressor on everything just completely transforms the beat and the sound, and it can really thicken things up quite nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and give that a try on this beat. Okay. Okay, that's without the compressor. There's just no kind of real life in it. But let's go ahead and get 12 on there and then do Remain and MFX to apply it to all the pads. And let's listen to that now. Still a little bit loud now because it does boost the volume ridiculously. So yeah, the compressor can just completely transform the sound of a beat. It can add so much more energy into your beat, and I think it's a little bit underrated on the SX and the A. I think the compressor on this is really nice. You kind of get a weird sidechain compression effect. It has kind of a ducking to it. So yeah, if you're struggling for that thicker sound, if you want to make something sound a lot more meaty and a lot beefier, definitely just slap the compressor on everything. I absolutely love doing that on this device, and it makes everything sound really, really nice. Okay, that's all my tips for today, guys. I hope these help you out. I think those are really, really useful, and those are ones that I genuinely have come to use over the years, over and over again, to save time and make this device a little bit easier to use. Please let me know in the comments if you've got any more of your own, or let me know which was your favorite from these ones that I've just shared with you. Don't forget about the links I said in the description. It really helps me out. Huge shout out to all my members of this channel, and I will be back with another video very, very soon.